Hello, y'all, and welcome back to round number 5 of the weekend previews here for the F1 2025 season. We are headed to Jeddah in Saudi Arabia for the third race of this little triple header we have to start the season, the 5th race overall. But as usual, before we get on to talking about this particular circuit and what we'll see coming up this week, we'll have a little bit of a talk of the storylines and things from the previous week out in Bahrain. So, as we typically do, we'll meet the teams as I go down the finishing order list, whichever the top driver shows up. So, to nobody's big surprise, McLaren, first team we're going to talk about, and Oscar Piastri. This was a pretty big statement race for him. Basically had the measure of Lando Norris the entire race weekend, led basically the entire way except for the pit stop phases, got himself on pole position, and a very good result for the Aussie driver. Really, when there was some kind of questions, and it's definitely looking like there's going to need to be some fighting out to figure out who is going to be top dog in that team, because Oscar Piastri in this season is looking very strong. Contrast that with kind of the demeanor and mentality of Lando Norris after this weekend, especially before the race, following qualifying, where he's saying that he doesn't even know how to drive an F1 car anymore. Still the championship leader, and by virtue of a pretty good drive to get himself back up into the podium positions, into P3 overall. But realistically, you would expect Lando Norris to be, up in the top 5, and then really the thing that surprises me the most is in the closing stages of the race, not being able to get past George Russell. And we saw it when he was fighting Leclerc earlier. He had a bigger tire offset, so it was a little bit easier for him to make the overtake. But Lando Norris, and I've seen this all the way back to previous seasons, he doesn't seem to be so great in wheel-to-wheel fighting at this point. And it's not that he doesn't have the ability to place the car and drive on trickier portions of the track. I think it's in the mental game. The way the rules are right now, the upper hand is so much in the possession of the inside car, and Lando Norris continues to be kind of dummied into taking the outside line, letting the inside car get that nose ahead at the apex, and then squeeze him out on the exit where he's got to back out. We saw it with Leclerc. It took him a couple tries to get past, and most critically, on that final attempt he had to try and get past George Russell. Tried to go around the outside of the turn 1 into turn 2 complex. George took the inside, just pushed him right over to the outside of the exit of turn 1, and then by virtue of Norris having to back out and kind of lift off the throttle, completely nullified the entire effect that the next DRS zone would have, his inability to get a run. Realistically, if he wasn't able to get the inside of turn 1, he was in a very good opportunity on much healthier tires than what George was running at that time, especially considering the brake-by-wire issues that Russell had and all that. Just tuck in straight behind, be right on the gearbox of George through turn 1, 2, and 3, and get him down the next DRS zone. We saw Verstappen do exactly that on Pierre Gasly on the last lap. Just stick right in his wheel tracks, turns 1, 2, and 3, and then boom, get him right down the DRS zone. But McLaren definitely looking to be the class of the field, a significant pace margin advantage in Bahrain. I would expect that to shrink slightly maybe in Jeddah, but that McLaren is just looking pretty well hooked up overall. Next up, we have Mercedes, another fantastic weekend from George Russell, this time dealing with significant issues. Qualified the car P2. Obviously, him and his teammate Antonelli both got one-place grid penalties for them being sent out of their garages before the green lights were on in qualifying. One-place grid penalty pushed him off of the front row, but still managed to get himself a P2 finish. Another very solid result for for George Russell, who's just kind of hanging around in this championship. It's, you know, he's been right there in the position where if something happens to the McLarens, he could be taking wins and significant points off of them, and it's going to be very good for Mercedes. Continue to say it, you know, week in, week out. That Mercedes looks to be not just a good car, but a car that is relatively friendly to drive as well. Kimi Antonelli, a good qualifying performance, a top 5 qualifying performance. Of course, that one place grid penalty. However, an interesting strategy call from Mercedes, essentially committing him before the safety car to what would have been a 3-stop. He went soft, medium, soft very early, where the softs really were not going to make it to the end. And that kind of just took him out of the points. He was pretty much a non-factor towards the end of the race. Was it a matter of him not holding onto the tires? I don't believe so. He showed in Japan that he can really hold on to the tires and you know, keep them alive, and did a fantastic job you know, so far this season. So I wouldn't expect it to be kind of the rookie woes of dealing with the Formula One Pirelli rubber. Just, I think, a poor strategy choice on Mercedes' part on the Antonelli side of the garage, and left him outside of the points-paying positions. Next up, Ferrari. Leclerc promoted up to second place start thanks to the George Russell penalty, and showed very good pace over the weekend. Lewis still seems to be a few tenths or so behind on raw pace, and then the little mistakes here and there that continue to kind of eat him up and cause him to lose chunks of time. But overall, a decent result for Ferrari, a P4, P5 finish. Ferrari, one of the only teams in the top 10 to start their drivers on the medium tire. Everybody else started on the soft. And it definitely cost them some positions early on. However, it was looking to be a very good strategy choice, especially in the second stint where they both went back onto the mediums. Both Leclerc and Hamilton were tearing their way through the field. And I think we're in a very good position to have essentially the best strategy for the rest of the race. I believe they were a bit too far behind Piastri to really affect anything, but I do believe they could have both challenged George. We might have seen a Ferrari 2-3 on the podium, if not for that safety car, which essentially left them the only choice, especially because they did not have any data on the degradation of the softs from their cars. Every other team that went soft on that safety car stint had some data on the softs before, so they probably would have had at least some kind of idea as to how the softs were performing. They left Ferrari basically the only option of using what was pretty obviously the worst race tire of the day, the hard tire, so much so that Max Verstappen's medium tire stint, or soft tire stint to open the race was just about as long as the hard tire stint he did before he switched onto the mediums a few laps before that safety car came out. But so the hard tire wasn't the best choice. I think, again, Ferrari made a brave and correct strategic choice, but safety car caught them out based on the timing of it. Let's see, any other notes? Nope, yep, we're good. Next up, Red Bull. Max Verstappen, a P6 finish in a weekend where the car definitely did not look all that great. He was really struggling with it, with the brakes, especially. I believe they, between qualifying and the race, actually changed all 4 brakes on that car, pads and rotors, and still seemed to have not really helped Verstappen out all that much. A rough weekend in both qualifying, and the race was all right for him. He managed to show some good consistency, and especially managed to, surprising things, get by Gasly in an Alpine on the final lap of the race. In the other Red Bull car, Yuki Tsunoda showing improvements still, continuing to get a little bit more on terms. Believe this marked the closest the Red Bull second driver had finished to Verstappen in terms of positions since Monza last year, and Yuki Tsunoda picks up the first top 10 finish for that second Red Bull car. So couple tries, just 2 tries of asking for him, and he's able to get that car into the points. It's very interesting to me, and this is something we've kind of seen over the time. It seems like, aside from the 1 year where the Red Bull was just head and shoulders above the rest, the 2023 season, it seems that the worse the Red Bull car gets, the less it compares favorably to the rest of the grid, the closer the gap between Verstappen and his teammate gets. And when the car has a higher ceiling, Verstappen's able to extract a little bit more. But, you know, take of it what you will, as far as adaptation of driving style, or just what the second Red Bull drivers are doing versus Verstappen. But I think it's interesting that gap, his gap to his teammate, doesn't really stay consistent when the car gets worse. It seems to get smaller as the car gets worse. But again, Yuki Tsunoda kind of going out there, and even with the limited amount of time he's had in that Red Bull car, proving that he belongs and has the opportunity to kind of continue in that car, and should be able to feel relatively safe, and probably was the right choice heading into the season. But, you know, gotta love politics. Next up, probably the earliest we've talked about this team, Alpine. Thanks to Pierre Gasly and a quality P7 finish out of him. Really looked on it this entire weekend. Of course, qualified up top 5, managed to start P4 thanks to the Antonelli penalty. But to take an Alpine car that was starting to look like scoring points was going to be a long shot, and put that thing in the top 5, and then drive a pretty good race was nice to see. Kind of expected to see the Alpine slip back a little bit through the field. I honestly, before the start of the race, expected to see Gasly kind of fall completely out of the points at the first pit stop phase, but drove a fantastic race and did so well that he had to force Verstappen to overtake him on the final lap. He was holding him off for that long. So very good from Alpine in that regard. Next up for him, though, for that team, though, Jack Doohan. Decent qualifying performance, got himself into Q2, nearly into Q3. So he's got some pace, but still just not quite showing what he's got overall race pace-wise. He had a very similar strategy to Pierre Gasly, so his drop through the field I don't think can be necessarily attributed to a different strategic choice or poor strategy. I just think he didn't quite have the measure of it out there on the track. And this is where I kind of alluded to it a little bit with Antonelli, but the Pirelli tires, the F1 tires, a little fairly different than what F2 is, and we typically see rookies coming in. We saw it with Piastri for his first season and a half. On high degradation races, usually the rookies eat the tires up a bit too much. There's still a lot of learning to do on how to manage the Pirelli tires for those rookies. So maybe that had something to do with it, but overall a relatively quiet Sunday for him after a pretty decent Saturday. So hopefully Doohan can continue to find some of that pace and improvement. Next up, we've got Haas, another double points finish result for the Haas outfit. Esteban Ocon starting from 15th, managing to get himself up into the top 10. Ollie Behrman, really the highlight there, starting dead last, P20, and drove his way through the field, clawing his way up through. So a very good day for Ollie Behrman. Managed to make some good positions up on the very first lap, which put him, I believe he was up to P15 by the end of the first lap. So definitely huge boon to his race in that regard to get those early moves done, and then drove quite well. Was fairly similar on pace to Ocon the rest of the race, and you saw that both the Haas team continuing to grab some good solid points. Next up, we have the Williams outfit, and not a great weekend for them. Alex Albon knocked out in Q1, although part of that a bit of, I don't know if you want to call it bad luck, poor stewarding, because they didn't track Nico Hülkenberg's track limits penalty for nearly 45 minutes until they were in Q3, until the field was in Q3. If that track limits had been properly deleted, Alex Albon makes it out of Q1 and into Q2, and we usually see him do pretty decently in that regard. But unfortunately, being knocked out of Q1 hurt Alex Albon's day pretty significantly. Carlos Sainz did make it through, and that will be the first time this season he's managed to out-qualify his Williams teammate. So maybe Carlos Sainz starting to figure a little something out. However, got into some serious fighting in the midfield, picked up some damage, and ultimately became a retirement in the race. Alex Albon, I believe, finished 13th, if I remember. But it was not a great day, so no points for the Williams outfit. VCARB next up. Isaac Hadjar continues to impress. Ooh, there's some rear locking there. Cool. Isaac Hadjar continues to impress decently. Got himself into Q2 in the VCARB. And then kind of got VCARB'd. I don't know what VCARB was thinking. The early pit stop off of the starting soft tires put him on a strategy. He still went to stop like a lot of other drivers, soft then medium and then on the hards to end it. But essentially by pitting him that early off of the soft tire, he was always going to be at a negative tire differential to everybody else in the field the whole way. And it showed. We've seen VCARB do this a few times where they make an inexplicably early pit stop and then they're just not in the race. As a result, Liam Lawson finished ahead of Isaac Hadjar, but it only qualified, P17, I believe it was. So out in Q1 as Lawson's struggles continue. And the other thing, Liam Lawson, multiple penalties in the course of the Bahrain race for racecraft. And he just doesn't seem to have his head on straight, unfortunately. He's really still struggling on the grid, and I don't know if he's going to be able to stick around by continuing to struggle like that. Next up, we got the Aston Martin outfit. Again, similar strategy for Alonso to the Ferraris, but deep in the pack, was not able to make much out of that offset. Was a pretty poor showing for Aston Martin. Stroll, a Q1 exit this week, and really just a quiet weekend for Aston Martin. Didn't really get stuck into any of the fights, but they were ahead of one other team that had probably a more disappointing week, which was the Sauber team. Now, Nico Hülkenberg did make it to Q2 by virtue of that track limits not being identified, but obviously started down lower once that lap time was deleted, and he slotted into, I believe it was P16 is where he ended up, based on his previous valid lap time. Bortoleto, unfortunately, was last man running, so poor time for Sauber there. Just never really got stuck in and impacted the race in any way. And then insult to injury for the Sauber team. After that, even though both drivers were out of the points, Nico Hülkenberg disqualified due to excessive plank wear, the same thing that got Lewis Hamilton in China, as well as Pierre Gasly. So plank wear seems to be popping up a fair bit of times this season. But that's kind of what we have for the Bahrain Grand Prix. I can't remember if the pole position is inside or outside. It's outside. But here we are. Let's talk a little bit about the Saudi Arabian track, and we'll take a little guided tour around the circuit. So as we slot into the pole position grid box, get ready to just hop off the line. Not a tremendously long run down to turn one, only a couple hundred meters before you're on the brakes. Turn one into tight little chicane here. You're going to get a lot of cars stacked up. It's probably one of the better overtaking opportunities. But then you get into these little sweepers that are very characteristic of the Jeddah circuit. On the first lap, you're not going to see a lot of people going side by side. You're going to want to see people get stuck in line because the walls are so tight and it's so difficult to go side by side through these sweeping sets of corners, especially this high-speed combination of right-handers into this left-hander. But then you do get a little bit of a run. If a car can get a good exit out of here, you come down to this little hairpin at the end. And it's got pretty significant banking, which is very nice. You'll see some cars run up higher on the banking. We've seen quite a number of around the outside overtakes. But look for that to be a non-DRS assisted overtaking spot. Cars are going to get kind of filtered back into a straight line again because this little tricky, want to get very tight to the left, and then this on this right-hander very close. But then you hit a detection point for DRS right there, and now is really where the racing gets to be on. You've got 3 DRS zones around this track. First one starting right here as you sweep through these gradual left and right-handers. You have a good run. A moderate amount of braking to get the car turned in for this quick left-right combination. And then once you're out of the second right-hander, again, back onto the straight, another big blast of DRS. This long sweeping left-hander leads to one of the better overtaking, I would say probably turn 1 and the final corner, both similar overtaking opportunities as you get on the brakes into this final hairpin. It's very wide on entry, but the walls tighten up on the exit. So you're going to see drivers try and get that job done early, or just stick in the slipstreams, follow them through because the final DRS zone activates right here. And then you get a nice blast down the start-finish straight in order to try and get the move done down into turn 1, which is the slowest corner on the track. And thanks to the left-rightedness of it, there's some good opportunity for some switchbacks and putting the pressure on the car ahead, taking some extra lines. So next up, obviously, as you saw from the slower speed kind of track tour there, we've talked about the corners, but the other thing that's always present, the walls. They're all over the place. It's a very tight track. It's a very fast track. And we are pretty consistent with getting safety cars around the circuit. So look for the safety car possibility to be fairly high and impacting strategy. On that note with strategy, obviously we've seen that the tires have been a bit too resilient for the last couple races. Pirelli has confirmed that for this race, last couple of years, they were the middle tires of the compound, the C2, C3, and C4, going from hardest to softest. This year, they are shifting one step soft and going the C3, C4, C5 compound. So, should put a little more degradation into the cars and hopefully make a change up to the strategies. Typically, we've been seeing one-stop strategies around, but of course the safety cars have kind of played havoc with what a total clean air strategy would be around this circuit. So look for, we're going to need some good data from the practice sessions. Again, it's another night race, so realistically the only true representative lap running you're going to get is in FP2, as it'll be at the night in the nighttime usually, like Bahrain. FP1 and FP3 will take place while the sun is up, and the track temperature will be vastly different, and the cars will behave significantly different because of that. But we've typically seen mediums and hards as part of the one-stop strategy. The medium seems to be a decent race tire around here, or was, so that would be the C3. So look for the hard tire to potentially be an option. Soft tire, we did see some, the C4. So maybe we'll see the C5 come into play, although I think the C5 might end up being just a little too overheatable and fragile. But all in all, it's not an awful track as far as the tires go. There are some stops and starts in some high energy areas, but doesn't have quite the sustained front end load that you would get out of a Suzuka. it doesn't have quite the same, that would strain the front tires, it doesn't have quite the same rear end strain that you get out of like a Bahrain, where there's lots of very slow stops and starts and acceleration zones. So look for ooh, totally missed that corner. Let's just cut right through. And look out for people doing that while trying to make overtakes, just missing the corner altogether. But yeah, so strategy should be interesting. Obviously, Bahrain, or it's in Saudi Arabia. Chance of rain is basically, well, none. But we'll have to see. Based on what the car performances have been like, people are saying that the McLaren really gets its biggest benefits in the low-speed corners and not quite mid and high speed. I think Mercedes is going to go very well around here. Just based on what I've been seeing out of the car recently. We'll see if Ferrari can take a step forward there. It looked like on their upgrade package for Bahrain, it wasn't looking too great, but race pace looked all right for them overall. So we'll have to wait and see what we can do out of that. So let's go ahead and get geared up and try and turn in a good fast lap here so you can see just what it is to try and push your way around the circuit. But as far as what's going on there storyline wise, I guess look out for Oscar Piastri. He has the chance now to put the screws to his teammate for the championship in this race. Another Oscar Piastri led weekend could spell trouble for Lando Norris. So here we go. Out of the final corner, crossing the line, heading down quick, looking for this little yellow marker just ahead of the 100-meter board. Down into turn 1, turn 2, get the car rotating, track out, try and get on the throttle as much as you can. It was not a very good run. Find as close to the wall as you can possibly get. Really trying to just keep the foot flat to the floor through this section. Tiny lift there, probably didn't need it. But this is really where you're going to punish the front tires through that first sector, and we've lost about 0.2 on our best lap. Now we head down to this hairpin. And you can see the banking, how much you can lean into it and really carry speed. One of the trickier combinations of corners on the circuit, probably about 75 meters. You want to get it tipped in, and then on the exit, there's some little bump in that curve. Oop, touch the wall. That would have been bad. We have seen a crash from Lance Stroll in the next left-right combination where he touched the inside wall. That caused a safety car. Decent run through there, a little bit wide. And we're about 1/10 off of our personal best, unless we can have a mighty last corner. We don't want to try and do a 2021 Verstappen, though. You can see how much that corner narrows on the exit. You got to kind of sweep it out wide, and it's going to make it harder to go side by side for cars. So yeah, we run into a nice purple final sector, 29.352. But Bahrain, or I keep saying Bahrain, Jeddah does have the opportunity for some good racing with that kind of triple combination of DRS zones. So hopefully we can get another quality race. I guess it's really going to depend on how the tires behave. But thank you all for joining me on the third week of this triple header, and I'll catch you before the next race. See you later.